There seems to be a whole lot of talk right now in the industry about scanning vehicles. We've had 4 OEM manufacturers that have recently released statements saying that we need to scan vehicles before and after. We've seen some OEMs use the words must. We've seen some OEMs use the word mandatory. We also know that there's been a lot of buzz in the industry for several years that there are manufacturers such as Toyota and Honda and Hyundai and Kia that say that if a vehicle's in an accident, it must have a seat calibration done to it. And then what happens is there's a lot of questions like, well, do I need to do that if the vehicle was unoccupied? Or do I need to do that if the airbags didn't deploy? So our goal today is to help clear up some of these myths, and my total intent for this panel discussion is for this to be an informative and educational presentation. So my goal is not for this to be argumentative, it's not for anybody to feel uncomfortable, it's just for to have an open, honest dialogue where we're transparent and we help to educate everybody. So if you're good with that, give me an amen. Amen. All right, good deal. Now, a couple other things we want to talk about today is that quite often the OEM manufacturers tell us in the repair information we need to do certain things. And the goal is if we really need to do it, then we need to do it. But I think a lot of times what we do is we start confusing our opinion for facts, and what we do today is we're here to look at the facts. And again, the purpose of our desired outcome of this presentation is to educate all parties, being the collision repair industry, insurers, shops, OEMs, and technicians. And also talk about should there be any parameters to some of these things. So, you know, does it apply to every make and model and every year? And if so, what are those parameters? So first of all, my name is Mike Anderson. I'm a former shop owner. I now own Collision Advice, and I will keep the bios very, very brief. I apologize. We have 2 insurers that agreed to sit on our panel discussion at the last minute, and I really appreciate that because I wanted to hear their perspective. Unfortunately, I have to apologize because I have photos of them, but we have Chris Evans from State Farm, and we have Jerry Poirier from Farmers. So let's give these 2 guys a big round of applause. From the OEM side, we have Mark Allen from Audi. If you just raise your hands, please, Mark. We have Chris Toby from American Honda. We have Erica Mendoza from Toyota. We have Brian Rain from Chrysler. We have John Eck from General Motors. We have Justin Miller from Nissan. And we also have Doug Kelly, who is the CEO of Collision Diagnostic Services, which has been one of the hottest, latest, and greatest tools that we've heard talked about in the industry. So we asked Doug to sit on this panel as well. So now for the questions, but before we begin into the questions for each of these panelists, and we are going to start with questions for the OEMs first, I want to share a couple stories with you, right? The first story is, there was an Audi Q7 that showed up at a shop that I was at. Customers said that their navigation unit had not quit working since the accident. All the car got was a bumper cover. What we did is we utilized the technology with the Aztec, went over the internet with an Audi factory scan tool, and I want to clarify, an Audi factory scan tool. We scanned this vehicle, and because Audi has freeze frame data, it told us that the navigation unit quit working 7 months prior to the date of loss. We were able to save that insurer over $1,500 because of the fact it was not from the accident. Let me tell you about story number 2. Story number 2, I was at a shop in Connecticut. And in this shop in Connecticut, they had a BMW come in where the core support needed to be replaced, the AC condenser, the radiators, and the headlights. Now, typically, we would write an estimate, and we would order the headlights, the AC condensers, radiators, etc. We would do the repairs, and when we reassembled the headlights, all of a sudden we plugged them in, they would not work, and then we'd ship it to a dealership. In this case, we actually scanned the vehicle with a BMW factory scan tool. Again, a factory scan tool. And what it did is it told us that there was a fault, a damage, or a fault code that the adaptive headlight control module was bad. We were able to order that in the beginning, 1 parts order, 1 estimate, and have on-time delivery. Let me tell you about story number 3. Had a lady come into the shop, we put a bumper cover on her car. That's all we did on a Volkswagen Beetle. Next day, she picks her car up at Thursday at 4:30 p.m. On Friday morning, she shows up at the shop and says, my radio hasn't worked since y'all fixed my car. Now, how many people ever heard something like that before? Give me an amen. So what we did is we went and we said, well, ma'am, we'll take a look at it. We hooked it up to a Volkswagen factory scan tool, scanned the vehicle, and again, Volkswagen has freeze frame data, and it told us that at 9:30 p.m. that night, somebody had plugged an incompatible device into her USB port and locked up the radio. So I went out to her and I said, ma'am, I've got good news, I've got bad news. She said, what's the good news? The good news is we fixed your radio. She said, what's the bad news? I said, the bad news is your car said you're a liar. I really didn't say that, but it sounds cool as crap, right? Last but not least, let me tell you the last story. This happened recently. A body shop fixed a quarter panel on a Toyota. Customer picked it up on February 4th. On February 24th, she went to change lanes. Her blind spot monitors told her it was okay to change lanes. She changed lanes and there was a car there. Fortunately, she avoided an accident, but she went back to the body shop and she said, I changed lanes because the car said it was okay and it wasn't. They scanned it with a Toyota factory scan tool through the Aztec device, and what they did is they found out that the blind spot monitor was off 7 degrees, and Toyota has a maximum tolerance of 5 degrees, and therefore that's why it did not work. There were no dash warning lights on that vehicle at all. Had they scanned that, it may have prevented a liability. So just some quick stories to share with you. So with that said, let's jump into our questions. Our first questions are for Mark Allen from Audi. So Mark, there's been a lot of news lately about scanning vehicles pre and post. I can tell you that in Volkswagen's OEM documentation, while they don't have a position statement, they do say that if a vehicle's in an accident, all codes must be queried to see if the vehicle's okay. What is Audi's position on pre and post repair scans?
Being part of Volkswagen Group of America, we follow the same belief that once the vehicle has been in an accident, it does need to be scanned pre and post. And it's not because of an accident. Let's take ourselves out of the mindset for a second. If that car goes into a dealer for service, they're responsible for scanning that vehicle for campaigns and codes and so forth for quality issues that we want to take care of and take care of our customer. Well, the same thing should be happening in the body shop. Even more so now because, to Mike's point, if you're replacing a bumper cover or you're doing some other sort of work, realistically, there is a recalibration. Even in the service lane, if they have to take the bumper cover off, say to take an engine out or something, it's a requirement to do a recalibration. So this is the things that we need to think about. We don't have a position statement yet. We will. I just haven't had time to write it for you, but we will have something that says that. It's super important. It is not only the safety quotient, as many of us were talking before we got together up on stage here. It's a quality issue. It's a quality issue for, yes, the brand of Audi, but it's also a quality issue for your brand, the body shop, for our insurers, so that we're taking care of that customer in a holistic and protecting each other's brand. And that's important where we have to work together.
Okay, so so Mark, I'm going to jump off script a little bit here, and I'm going to throw out something to all of the OEs. So one of the problems right now that we're seeing friction in our industry is that there's not a lot of labor times to do a lot of these recalibrations, 0-point calibrations, blind spot monitors, etc. I can tell you on a Chrysler, on a specific Chrysler, it says after the R&I, the bumper where the blind spot monitors are mounted at, I need to drive the vehicle in a straight line for 2 miles to recalibrate the sensors. There are some other vehicles that say I have to use a scan tool and targets. My question is, for all of the OEMs, obviously you do these things in your dealerships. Do you have some times that you use as OEM manufacturers in your service departments for a lot of these operations, such as recalibrations, etc.? Just a simple yes or no.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes. So my question is, right now we have an opportunity to come up with some resolution in our industry. We have information providers, CCC, Mitchell, and Autotex. I'm encouraging you to meet with these people and say, hey, you've already done the time studies, you know what these are, let's at least start coming up with some times, and that would remove a lot of the friction. How people agree with that, give me an amen. All right, good deal. So Mark, next question for you, sir. Are there any issues that could occur from an accident that would not necessarily trigger a dash light?
Yes, every recalibration on the vehicle. Let's face it, you're not using that system to kick a mill light. So it's a misconception that because I don't have a light, it's perfect. Absolutely wrong. It needs to be checked. It needs to be recalibrated.
Okay, and how would a shop know if there was a problem with a system in the vehicle if there's no dash light? How else can they tell? Can they do a visual inspection? What are some ways they can tell if there's one of these sensors or accident avoidance features is not working properly?
You know what? Those systems are there for safety and collision avoidance. Scan the car.
Okay, thank you. So now we're next to Chris Toby. So Chris, recently Honda released a statement probably one of the strongest out of any of the OEM manufacturers in regards to this pre and post scan. So a lot of the questions I'm hearing from the insurance companies is, does this mean every single Honda and Acura that's ever made that comes into my shop, or are there some parameters on this as far as years or options? So my question is, are there any parameters to this bulletin that you put out there?
We looked into establishing an end year or a first year and a last year for this. And when we went back and looked at this, we actually started triggering codes without mill lights back at the start of OBD2 in 1996. So essentially that's 20 years ago now. So realistically, just about any car that you're going to work on, that you're going to do a repair on, is going to need a scan. Some are going to need more depending on the complexity. Newer cars are much more complex. So we decided to just say all cars and leave it at that.
Okay, so one of the questions I've heard from an insurer that they did not want to be on the panel discussion today and ask is, well, if you feel this way, are you going to want to go back in time and have shops do recalls where they bring all these cars in that have been fixed in the past that didn't get this done? Or is there concern on that standpoint? And you may not be able to answer that.
That's a really hard question to answer. That's really going to be up to the shop. In a lot of cases, when the scan, if the car has a problem, it's going to come back for that problem anyway.
Right.
And I don't know that it's realistic to bring every car back in and rescan it. I think that we need to have an understanding that going forward, this is what needs to happen in order to fix the car properly.
All right, and for the insurer that asked me that question, I'm going to kind of put my own viewpoint on that, right? It has always been in the OEM documentation that vehicles need to be queried for fault codes. Now, they didn't have a position statement, but it was always buried in there somewhere. So at the end of the day, if a shop did not do that, the liability is going to be on the shop because they did not research the proper OEM repair procedures. That's Mike Anderson's opinion. So Chris, let's talk a little bit about these calibrations to seats. So I remember the first time I was researching a procedure on a Honda, and I stumbled across this. Actually, it was a guy named Will Latta from Latta Brothers in Minnesota. Said, hey, Mike, have you ever seen this thing on a Honda before that says you have to do, at that time it was called an OCS calibration, on a seat of a Honda, and it said if any of these items occur, and bullet point number 4 was if it's in a collision. So a lot of times people will say, well, Mike, that doesn't need to be done if the airbag doesn't deploy. Or Mike, that doesn't need to be done if there's no dash light on the dash. So first of all, is there a dash light that tells you that needs to be done?
No, there is not necessarily.
So I need the press to get this right. There is no dash light that will tell you that an OCS calibration needs to be done. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Right. So can you tell us what that is, why it needs to be done, and does it need to be done even if the vehicle's unoccupied?
Okay, so let's try to simplify this a little bit. We call it, the system that we're actually working with is called the seat weight sensor, and it's also been called occupant detection system over the years, depending on how it was packaged. Basically, this is a device that turns the front passenger seat into a set of scales and weighs the occupant, or at least the upper body of the occupant, to determine if they weigh enough to safely deploy a front passenger airbag. Basically, it turns your seat into a bathroom scale. Good analogy to simplify it and think about it is, would you throw your bathroom scale against a wall as hard as you could and expect it to weigh you accurately afterward? This scale is very sensitive. So even in the setup procedures, if you read the setup procedures published in the service information, it says turn the HVAC off. And I've been asked before, why do we need to do that? Well, that turns the blower off. And if you watch the scan data on this scale and you turn the blower on high, it will actually change the weight displayed on that tool. That's how sensitive it is. It's a precision instrument. You don't throw precision instruments into an impact and expect them to work.
Okay, next question. I recently did a search in Honda for a Honda lane assist, right? For lane departure, right? And it showed me a series of targets that I as a shop would need to recalibrate some of these sensors, right? And one of them was like a triangular cone that went on a stand. One was a checkered board, you know, that goes on a stand. So does Honda require specific targets? So it's, understand, ladies and gentlemen, it's not about just scanning a vehicle to find out what's wrong with it. It's about using a scan tool to do recalibrations, reanalyzations, and things of that nature. Does everybody get that? If so, give me an amen. right? So at the end of the day, some of these manufacturers require specific targets. So can you share us a little bit about your targets, and do you know an approximate cost of what those targets cost, and do they cross multiple Honda lines?
Okay, good question. There's various targets depending on whether you're aiming a, let's say, a lane keep assist camera, the front-facing camera, the radar unit. Are you facing lane watch on the passenger door mirror? Each one has its own specific requirements, and a lot of them are checkerboard shaped because that's what the camera is programmed to look for when it's in calibration. The targets cross multiple model lines, and the last time I checked, and there may have been some changes, but it was in the neighborhood of $2,800 for everything you would ever need, plus the scan tool software. And basically what these do is they put the combined with the scan tool software, they put the camera into a calibration mode to allow it to find the area that it needs to look for. So for example, on forward collision warning, we're looking for right edge lane, left edge lane, center lane. That's what we need to know. In a lot of cases, you can do a dynamic learn on our systems, and you can do it driving. So sometimes you don't need the targets, but here's the problem. If it's snowing outside and the edge of the lanes are obstructed, if you have the bad pavement where there's patches in the pavement, if you have checkerboard signs along the side of the road and the camera says, oh look, there's the checkerboard, it's not going to work too well. So the targets are a backup to do that so that we can learn them under any conditions. Dealers are required to have them. They're part of the tools. They're shipped automatically. They're available to any shop that wants them. They're what we call an 07 series special tool. So those tools are handled as service parts. They're available from any Honda or Acura parts department.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Thank you. All right, and by the way, Honda and Audi, do you both have booths here at the show floor? Or an exhibit? Do you have an exhibit here?
Yes, we do.
So if they stop by, they could talk to you more about that, correct?
Oh, please do stop by.
Okay,
I will
great.
be in and out all day and here tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Eric, I'm sorry, Mark.
No, we don't have a booth, but I will be at the Carliner booth later this afternoon, milling around. You can always grab me.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you. So next we have Eric Mendoza from Toyota. Now let me share a story with you about a Toyota. So I was in a shop in Connecticut. A lady came in. All she needed was a bumper cover, a grill, and a grill emblem. That's all she needed. They ordered the bumper cover, painted it off the car. The lady came in, they put the bumper cover on while she waited, replaced the grill and the grill emblem. She drove down the road and she came back and she said, my vehicle's acting funny. And what happened was the shop went ahead and scanned it with a Toyota factory scan tool, and it told them there was a problem with the adaptive control module. The adaptive cruise control. They did not mirror match the grill emblem. They put a charcoal gray one on it versus a clear one, and it caused the adaptive cruise control to work, intermittently, right? Again, there was no dash warning light for that. Had they scanned that vehicle before they released it to the customer, they would have known that. So Eric, again, Toyota recently released a statement on pre and post scans. Same thing I asked about Honda. Are there any parameters to this? Any certain years that it doesn't apply to, et cetera, et cetera? Just any comments you can make in regards to your position statement, sir.
Our position regarding the times is the same as Chris. We did not put any specific times in there. All the way back to 96, we have the systems in the car that are going to do the same thing. This is the first that I've heard of a desire for parameters, and I want to say that if that's a real concern in the industry, we're here to serve our shared customers. The bill payers are their customers on the claims, our shops are customers fixing the car, and they're our customers because they bought our cars. So if we need to investigate putting a parameter on there to make it more clear, we're happy to do so.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk a little bit about the 0-point calibration. So can I just kind of be the bearer of some bad news? One of the biggest problems in our industry is, as shops, we research this and we say, Toyota says I need to do a 0-point calibration. We will then call and tell an insurance that. The insurance carrier will call a service department, and then the service department or a dealership says, they don't need to do that unless there's an airbag light on or something like that. How many of you have ever had that situation occur? Please raise your hands. So it happens quite often, right? What could a shop do if that situation occurs when they're dealing with an uneducated or uninformed, and this is no ill intent because it's not just a Toyota thing, it happens with Honda and Chrysler and Hyundai, so it's all of them, but what would be the path of resolution that a shop could do if they encountered a uneducated service department person who was kind of muddling in their discussion with an insurance appraiser?
Educate them.
Okay?
Show them the repair manual procedures. Show them the crib bulletin. Show them the other documentation that we put out there. I think that if you educate them on how the system works and why it's required, it's common sense. Just like Chris said, would you throw your bathroom scale against the wall and then stand on it and rely on that reading?
So recently you and I had a phone conversation where I had a customer whose vehicle was out in front of their house. Somebody came along at 2:30 in the morning and ran into the vehicle. The vehicle was unoccupied, so nobody was sitting in their Toyota, so nobody was hurt. And there was a discussion between the shop and the insurance company as, does this vehicle still need a 0-point calibration if nobody was in it, nobody was wearing their seatbelt, and the airbag did not deploy? What would your answer to that be, sir?
My answer to that is absolutely. It still needs to be checked and calibrated for the occupant classification. And we have a Tacoma right over there in our booth that we'd be happy and we'd encourage you to come so that we can show you how that works. I'll take that Tacoma, I'll leave the car off, key out of the ignition. Before we do that, we'll check what the calibration is. We'll look at the calibration, we'll set it to 0. We'll shut the car off, we'll go around to the passenger seat and just give it a whack with our hand. We'll go back in there, do a sensitivity check, and see what it reads. And I'm telling you from my experiences, it's off. It's not 0 where it was. So that's a situation that replicates unoccupied, hit. Does it change the calibration of the occupancy classification system? It does.
Okay, so a question for you and Eric and for Chris from Honda. What would happen if a shop did not do that 0-point calibration or Honda's calibration? If they did not do it and they put the consumer back in it, what would the possible outcome be, or what could happen if that vehicle's in an accident again? Chris, I'll start with you.
Okay, so the potential outcome is, like I said earlier, that device is there to qualify whether that person has enough body mass to safely deploy a front passenger airbag. So if it doesn't weigh accurately, there's a possibility that we could deploy a front passenger airbag with a child in the seat, and the outcome would not be good.
Okay, Eric?
Yeah, it's possible, exactly the same. It's possible that the airbag will go off when it's not supposed to, and it's also possible that the airbag won't go off when it is supposed to.
Okay, great. So to my body shop peers, I'm going to say something that may upset you. And if so, I apologize. But I'm all about talking straight. I go around the country, I speak to over 4,000 people a year on behalf of Exalted Coating Systems doing estimate classes. 90% of the people in my classes have never ever charged or performed a 0-point calibration or a calibration on a Honda seat. And at the end of the day, the reason they did not perform it was not because an insurance company would not pay them, but it was because they were not aware of it and they did not know it. So at the end of the day, as body shop people, we have to quit using the insurance companies as an excuse for our ignorance. And I mean that with the utmost respect. Is anybody cool with that? Give me an amen. It all starts with us educating ourselves about why this needs to be done and having the proper documentation. All right, Eric, next question. Do any of your procedures require the use of specific OEM targets?
Yeah, absolutely. We brought a couple of them over. You want to take a look?
Yep.
From outside of the scan tool that's required to perform these calibrations, this setup here is used for a forward recognition camera. This setup here is used for blind spot monitoring or millimeter wave radar sensor out in front of the car. Until it falls, right? It's good until it's not. Yeah. And this is a setup that's used to hold up against a blind spot monitoring sensor, and you can tell whether it's that 5 degrees off that Mike was talking about or not, depending on how that weight hangs and reads on there. And I'd like to point something out. This piece of paper here is in the repair manual. You print it off. It's in the repair manual instructions. So if you printed off the repair manual instructions for this procedure, you would get this piece of paper target, and similarly, this piece of paper target. So if you go to the repair manual, follow the instructions, your tools are there too.
You know, I just got to add very quickly, I saw a video on YouTube recently with BMW where some of the sensors on their bumpers, you actually have to drop a plumb bob down, you put a mark on the floor, and then you have a target that slides up there, and then that's how you do your calibration. So keep in mind, things like this or maybe not be required just for Toyota, but for other manufacturers as well.
Thanks, Mike.
Is that it, Eric?
That's all that I brought.
All right. Let's give Eric a big round of applause on that, everybody. Great job. Thank you, Eric. Okay, so now we're going to move on to Brian from Chrysler. So Brian, recently Chrysler released a position statement on pre and post scans. Obviously, I've had a great relationship with you as well, and I appreciate, you know, you were kind of the first one, right? You guys were the first ones to jump out there and really say something about this. So I'll kind of ask you the same thing that some of the other insurance companies are wondering is, are there any parameters on this, right? Is it every year or is it just certain years? Are you open to discussions with the insurers about that, et cetera, et cetera?
Same position everyone else has. I mean, we haven't put parameters on it, realizing that there's obviously been some discussion. You know, this is kind of new territory for all of us. We're still trying to work through it and figure out what's best at the end of the day for the customer, right? You know, I think it started with a philosophy that, you know, we don't want to just play in the game. We want to change the way the game is played. And to do that, we're trying to do everything we can, which is right by our customers at the end of the day. And if we need to look at that, we'll look at it. But we want to make sure the vehicle is always repaired properly and safely. And if that means we need to scan all the vehicles, then we need to figure out something.
Okay, so, you know, you recently shared something with me on a Pacifica, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes.
How many, so you recently emailed me this picture of a Pacifica. How many computers are in that vehicle?
It's over 200.
Over 200 computers in the new Pacifica, right? So how do we know that every single one of those things is functioning properly, not just for safety, but also for comfort features? You know, you can do a perfect job on somebody's car, but if they're driving home and their hands-free doesn't work or their steering wheel doesn't heat up, they're going to be a little upset. Can you share with us, Brian, are there any types of collision avoidance systems or calibrations that you're aware of that need to be done on Chryslers?
Yeah, well, first, I'm not like the prop comic here, Carrot Top. I don't have any, but I did print it off because we were talking about it, and that's what it looks like. It's
can we pass that around?
Yeah, you can show it everyone. It's hard
So I'll pass this around, and maybe if you could, just maybe pass it on to someone else when you get done. Okay, Brian, thank you.
That gives you some idea to what we're talking about. I mean, it's, you know, not to date myself, but...
Real quickly, Brian, I'm sorry. Are they allowed to take a photo of that with their cell phone?
Yeah, that's
so if you have a cell phone, you want to take a photo of it, please feel free to do so.
So, you know, it's not like, not to date myself, but when I grew up, I could open the hood of a car and see pavement. Can't do that anymore. And obviously with that comes the safety systems and blind spot monitoring and collision avoidance, and it becomes so sophisticated that you get to a point where even if a windshield is being replaced because of a chip, you need to recalibrate all the sensors that are shooting through that, because what if you're using an aftermarket and it's got waves in it? It doesn't hold the same convex as the OE windshield. You need to recalibrate and make sure everything's firing, because you know, one of the best videos, and I'm sure you guys have seen it, was Honda showed a watermelon and an airbag, and what happens if it's a 1/10 of a second late. I don't want to take that chance. I don't want to take that chance with my children, and I wouldn't want to take that chance with any of your kids, or you for that matter. So.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So are you aware of any specific targets like Toyota or Honda? I know like on the Chryslers I've seen, some of them you can just drive like in a straight line and it recalibrates them, but is there anything that you're aware of it that requires the use of targets?
Not to my knowledge. I'm not the engineer. He's actually doing a Pacifica demonstration right now, but there is some things where you can drive and you do recalibrate that way, but I mean, even when you get into unrelated items, and that's where the scanning becomes important, if you're doing an ABS module, now you have to calibrate the steering again because that's changed. So you're going to need to use a scan tool to figure out where all the codes need to go. So. Okay,
and then the last question for you, Brian, is you've got all this audience, you've got over 100 people here. If you had one message or one thing you want to share with them, what would it be?
You know, I think, like I said, at the end of the day, we're trying to take care of the customer. We always want the vehicle to be repaired as best as possible. You know, for Fiat Chrysler, we don't have a lot of dealer-owned body shops, so we rely a lot on the independent repair facilities out there to take care of our customers. So to do that, We've come up with a certified program to help give you the tools, the training, and the equipment so that you can repair these vehicles. And on top of that, all our repair manuals are free. We have the position statements out there. So we've tried to make this as user-friendly as possible to make it as easy so that way if you need to repair a vehicle, you're getting the right information, you're getting what you need, and you know what you need to do up front. I think Aztec has a great option because I know that to go out and buy 9 OE tools doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but if you can use one interface that does interface with all the OE tools, you're getting yourself the advantage of having what you know is a quality scan when you are doing it. So.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Yep.
Mark Allen from Audi, I want to go back to you for just a moment. We've been talking about targets. Does Audi have targets that they require for recalibrations? Could you expand on that for just a few moments?
Yes, we do have targets that we require. They are rentable by the dealer because of the expense. And we're just starting to get into this more and more across our model lines. So they are available to the dealers. But I also have a thought, and Toby and Gary Ledoux and I were looking at their booth earlier today. What's the difference if we were traveling to the moon? What does 1 degree mean to every one of us if we were traveling to the moon? If we were off 1 degree, we would totally miss the moon. So it's not only about calibrating these things, it's about the accuracy of your work before then. Every one of these calibrations, if you're listening, talks about center line of vehicle. So there has to be an establishment of center line of vehicle, whether it's an alignment, which we require, and there's a weighting quotient to that. Because guess what? We put weight in the car, whether it's kids, people, dogs, whatever. It changes different parameters that you have to look at. So it's super important to have that accurate. What if you pulled it and it wasn't within that 1 degree of accuracy and we have to project down the road? We might not be able to calibrate it.
Okay,
so
great,
just a thought.
Great point, Mark. Thank you. Mr. John Eck from GM, we're going to go over to you, sir. So, GM obviously has not come out with a position statement on pre and post scans. So just to ask you, is there a way that a shop can verify that everything is working from a safety or accident avoidance systems? How can we verify that those things are working other than scanning vehicles? Is there anything else that you know of? And what is General Motors' positions and thoughts on these scannings? And are there any calibration procedures that maybe we're not aware of that you'd like to share with us today?
Well, we don't have a position statement on pre-post scan today. However, I can tell you that we are aggressively working on that to, like some have said, looking at that, how soon can we have that position statement out, and to what degree can we go into the detail relative to a time period of vehicles. We would probably be in line more with Honda in saying, does it matter? I mean, every vehicle has to be fixed correctly, and it has to be done very pre and post scan. Other ways to calibrate? No, a dashboard light is not a diagnosis. And just like we do when you pull a vehicle into a service lane, what do? We plug it into a scan tool and read fault codes. The same applies now in the collision industry because of the integration of technology into the vehicle, into the crash componentry, crash avoidance and things like that. You have to do it. And we're going to be looking at it and coming out with our statement hopefully very soon relative to doing a pre-post. And as far as calibrations, I was talking to our lead engineer, electrical engineer, last week, and he is fully aware that, and we had this discussion, that we haven't done enough and we need to do more relative to calibration. And I would expect that that's going to be, kind of the next phase of some of the position statements you'll see relative to GM, and making sure that the integrated systems that do need the calibration are done. Our position statement will read to probably the aspect of making sure you have zero tolerance calibration impact on your repair. It's no different than in a mechanical repair. You can't diagnose a vehicle properly to know what you have to repair unless you do a pre-scan.
Thank you. You know, also for the audience, I won't say which OEM manufacturers, but I can tell you 4 OEM manufacturers that my good friend Jake Rodenroth from Aztec shared with me recently. We were researching some OEM repair procedures that the OEMs actually stated you could not use any plastic filler material at all when you repaired the bumper covers because it affects the way some of the sensors work. So I'll go back to Chrysler and go back to you for a minute, Brian. Can you validate for me that that's accurate? Because one of those was a Chrysler vehicle.
Yep, that is accurate.
Okay, and Mr. John Eck from General Motors?
Yeah, I believe that's accurate as well, relative to how it impacts the sensors and the safety systems. It modifies the initial technology to the point that it won't calibrate correctly.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's move on to Justin Miller from Nissan. So Nissan, you recently presented a position statement on pre and post scans, and you also released a position statement as well as bumper covers, going back to what I just said. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? And the same question I had for Toyota and Honda, are there any parameters to that?
Sure. Nissan released 13 position statements in June. It's also a work in progress, so we have some right now. Pre and post scanning. Nissan has taken the position that pre-scanning is highly recommended, is the language we use. However, post-scanning, mandatory, and that is the language we use. We think for a safe repair, post-scan has to be done 100% of the time. We can't think of a scenario where it shouldn't be done. Okay, so that's where we're at with that. With bumper covers, that was specifically related to bumper covers equipped with sonar. And it only addresses replacement, not repair. So Nissan's taken the position that if a bumper cover equipped with sonar needs replacement, an OEM bumper cover should only be used. Does that answer your question?
Yep, that sounds great. So going back to this in parameters, is it going all the way back to the beginning of time, or is there a certain year? Or
like the others, we did not specify that, but if that is something the industry wants, we're absolutely happy to do that.
Okay, great. What about targets? Any specific targets that you're aware of that are required to do some of these calibrations on Nissan?
You know what? I talked to my engineers last week, and I did not get that information from them, so I'll consult with them on that.
Okay, then maybe just gonna let the industry know through the trade publications.
Absolutely, and also I had a conversation last week. This is a position statement we're working on with the 0-point calibrations. I did talk to engineering, and while we're still working on when it needs to be done in a collision event, I do know for certain that anytime a seat is R&I'd, removed and installed, or any component of that system is removed or installed, the calibration is mandatory.
Great, great. So something else I want to share with you that are insurers is a lot of times the way as us collision repairers find out that we have to do these things is if we use a third-party software application like CCC's Repair Methods or All Data or Mitchell's Tech Advisor to analyze our estimates and come back and say, hey, here's something the OEMs say you need to be aware of. But there are some insurers that say if there's a line on the estimate and it's included, delete that line. That's a bad thing for us, because if we delete that line, even though the labor is included, it may not allow us to be identifying through software that certain procedures are required. I'll give you an example. Recently, I was working on a Nissan Versa, replacing the quarter panel. I scrubbed it through a third-party application, and then I had to R&I the airbag because I cannot weld near that when I replaced the quarter panel, and I have to R&I the headliner and center pillar trim. Well, this third-party software application said, hey, this center pillar trim must be replaced if it's R&I'd. That is a non-reusable part. That was an included operation. So to the insurers, had I deleted that line for insurance compliant, it never could have alerted me to things that I needed. So I just want to share that with you. It must be on the estimate for these third-party applications to alert you to what you need. Are we good with that? Give me an amen. All right, good deal. Justin, thank you. So now what we're going to do is, and Doug, we're going to get back to you with some questions here in a few moments. So this is a question for all of the OEM manufacturers, right? So each one of you, I'm just going to go down the line. How would it be possible for a collision repair shop or technician to determine damage to a vehicle without performing a pre-scan, meaning to do an output test? Is there a way that I can tell adaptive headlight control module's bad, or adaptive cruise control unit's bad, or that certain seatbelt pretensioners are bad? Are there ways that I can determine these things that are there wrong without doing a scan. So I'm not here to say scans are right or wrong. I just want to know, can I absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, identify everything that's wrong with that vehicle without performing a scan, Mr. Allen?
No, there is no melon thump test to go, that's a bad melon. You have to scan it.
Okay, Chris?
Absolutely, you're going to require a scan to do that, because we've had a vehicle subjected to an unknown level of G-force impact. It's scrambled electronics. It may have damaged harnesses. It may have damaged connectors. Some of the pins on these connectors are the size of sewing needles now, 0.64 millimeter. And it's very easy to bend them during a repair. It's very easy to damage them during a crash. The scan is the way we find out what is and isn't working on the car. The post-scan is to confirm that everything that was disconnected and or repaired is working the way it's supposed to.
Thank you. Eric?
Like, the safe answer to your question from my perspective is you need to do a scan to find everything. Truth of the matter is there are systems that just won't work, right? Let's talk about one-touch windows, for example, something like that. It's not going to work. So in theory, if you were to go through and test every single system on the car, you'd probably be able to identify some that didn't work and there was no dash light on, so a similar thing. But the safe answer is you got to perform a scan.
Okay. Brian?
You got to perform the scan. A great example, and I know you use it sometimes, is vehicles in a front-end collision. The rear fascia could be completely fine, perfect, back end perfect, but the sensors need to be recalibrated. And if you don't do that, now you could have delayed the response, or it may not even work in a collision avoidance case, and now you have an accident on your hands. So you need to scan the vehicle.
Okay, thank you. John?
No, you need to scan the vehicle pre and post scan.
Okay, Justin?
To answer the question, beyond a shadow of a doubt, scan is necessary.
Okay. So one of the analogies I like to use is because a lot of times insurers will say to me, well, Mike, what happens if there are no codes? Should we still have to pay for that? And my right, wrong, or different, it's just my opinion, right? Is that if I was to, some of you have children and your children hurt themselves at the playground and you took them to the hospital and they x-rayed their leg and their leg was okay, does the health insurance generally still cover the x-ray? And the answer is yes, because it's the only way they could insure or make sure nothing was wrong. And I think that's where our industry is moving at, right? Okay, so next question I have for each of the OEMs is there a difference between an aftermarket and an OEM scan tool? So let me just say this. I personally have an Aztec and everybody that works for me has an Aztec. And when we go to shops consulting, we scan vehicles with an Aztec because it hooks up to only OEM scan tools. Is that correct, Mr. Kelly? So, and I will tell you that I personally have scanned over 1,000 vehicles that had no dash warning lights, that had problems with them related to the accident. Now, have I scanned vehicles that had no problems related to the accident? Absolutely. But I'm thinking about all the ones that did, right? So let's start with each of you, and Mr. Kelly, I'm going to allow you to chime in on this one. A lot of people say, well, an aftermarket scan tool will do the same. I'll give you an example. A lot of your GM products, you R&I a door handle or mirror for paint. You drive the car to paint, you come back, you reinstall the door handle mirror after you painted it. It will actually have a fault code that says low voltage drop, but there will be no warning light on the dash. That was created as a result of the repair. So at the end of the day, there is no dash warning light for that. Now, while that's not a safety issue, it's still a cyber fingerprint that says somebody's been in this vehicle before. Does everybody understand that, yes or no? Right, wrong, or different, that's the way it is. I will tell you, that's one of the things that I see that aftermarket scan tools quite commonly do not pick up on. It's those types of things. So starting with you, Mark, aftermarket versus OEM scan tools, are they the same? Can they do everything an OEM scan tool does? What are your thoughts?
No, they're not the same. You can't go to the level of diagnosis that you can with the in our case, we call it Otis scan tool. You can't.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
As we said in the position statement we issued last month, American Honda does not test anyone else's scan tool, but we can tell you this, that the IHDS is the tool that we design, and by requirement, we have to support our car 100%. So that tool has everything that is needed to scan that car and find out what's wrong with it. It's a cost of doing business. We have to do it. So you'd have to go back to your scan tool manufacturer and say, hey, I've got this, will it do it?
Okay, thank you. Eric?
I'm going to go along the same lines. We can guarantee what our scan tool will do, and I can tell you that I know the people that build the software and put that thing together. The second that that car comes off the line, there's information in the scan tool to support it already. So it is absolutely the best piece of equipment that you can use to scan our cars. And I'd like to take that and roll it into the information system too. Our technical information system, updates happen to these things, to the text streams, to the information system. Updates happen all of the time. When those updates happen, the day that the update changes, it's in TIS, it's in the text stream, and I think that aftermarket companies would probably really have a challenge keeping up with those updates.
Okay, thank you. Brian?
It's similar to the others. We don't test the other OE tools out there, but we know ours is right. And we've had several of the IRFs come back to us who have tested an OE versus a non-OE scan tool, and they've missed some codes. So, from that case, if you're doing that, and I said this to you before, I mean, we hope you get it right, and hope is not a strategy. So we've got to recommend ours or something like Aztec's.
Thank you.
Yeah, for General Motors, we support the GDS, which is the Global Diagnostic tool. We have not tested or validated any of the aftermarket tools. We also we had the Tech 2, which was up until about 2010 when we moved to a Class A architecture, global architecture. The first vehicle there was the 2010 Camaro on that system. And so we do have a modular unit that will connect with the Tech 2 to help read it if you're using the Global Diagnostic tool, the GDS unit from General Motors for the newer vehicles. But aftermarket ones, we haven't tested or validated those to know where they stand. Have they coded in all of our, calibration coding and things like that? We just don't have that to be able to validate that.
Thank you, John. Justin?
I posed the same question to our engineers and got the same answer as these fellas. We just don't test the aftermarket scan tools. The only one we're comfortable with is ours, which is the consult tool. So that's where we stand as well.
All right, thank you. So now I'm going to go to Doug Kelly. Doug Kelly is the CEO of Collision Diagnostic Systems, which is also the founding company of the Aztec. So, Doug, obviously when your company started out, you were utilizing some aftermarket scan tools, but you transitioned over to all OEM scan tools now. So what has been your experience between aftermarket and OEM scan tools?
Well, let me first say that we do test aftermarket tools in our Plano headquarters back in Texas. There are some really good aftermarket tools, so I want to make sure we don't broad brush it and suggest that the aftermarket tools don't work. But what I can tell you is there's some really good points that have been made up here, which is that newer cars, the updates, the changes that are going on, the aftermarkets have to play catch up. And the challenge in collision repair is, unlike independent mechanical garages that get cars 4 and 5 years later in their life after warranty, collision shops are getting cars right off the assembly line. So the probability of being able to actually perform work on those cars with an aftermarket scan tool is at risk. I'll just put that out there. The other thing is the aftermarket tools don't get the build data. So one of the advantages that the car companies have, obviously...
So can you explain to the audience what build data is? Because it's really important.
Well, I mean, it's what came on the car to begin with. Now, obviously, there can be changes to that with aftermarket modifications, but assuming that car is in its original state, you're going to get to know what features and functions are on that vehicle. A lot of those items that we are accustomed to, which are on the window sticker, don't show up on a dashboard anymore. A heated steering wheel, air-conditioned seats, adaptive cruise control, rain sensing windshield wipers. I mean, all these things are on that car, but you have no idea if you don't have the build data. So, you asked before about, can you tell if this is working or not working? Even with the scan tool, let's be honest, it's a collision repair. Parts are missing, modules may be left at the side of the highway. There's still visual inspection that's needed. So, a scan tool is good, and it's a good start. But, we're in the business of recreating or rebuilding a vehicle after an accident, and it's unlike a service bay at a mechanical garage. We hire a lot of automotive technicians out of dealerships. Sorry about that. But, in the course of doing that, we have to go through an education process with these guys because they're used to looking at whole cars. And we have to remind them, Copart's been a great partner. We'll bring in wrecked cars in the back. We'll show them, this is what you're looking at. You know, you're not looking at a car that's intact. You got cut wiring harnesses, blown fuses. There's systems that shut down when there's not enough power given to the car. So we have to make sure there's power to that vehicle, that that vehicle can communicate. So there's a lot to this. It's not just about scan tools. And the other point I wanted to mention earlier is there's been a lot of discussion about repair methods and repair procedures. Before you do anything, you have to know what car you're working on. And doing that research up front is the first step before you even diagnose it.
Yep, great, Doug, thank you. Okay, so let's go to our next question. Mark Allen from Audi, you guys are one of the best OEM manufacturers to provide what's called freeze frame data. Could you share with everybody what freeze frame data is? It's like the date, time, mileage, stamp, etc.
Yeah, so basically when the codes occur, it gives you the date, time, and as Mike said, when it happens. Then you can go into the diagnostic and figure out, all right, what is that problem? But it does go back in time, and it also clears over time. So if it's a minor code that doesn't mean anything, eventually the system looks at it and goes, all right, it's cleared up, and we don't have to deal with this. I also have to suggest there's a lot of good stuff on what comes out of OBD2. The chairman of the SAE board happens to be a Volkswagen Group of America employee. Great guy to talk to, super knowledgeable. But they have some white papers out there if you have interest in what really comes out of OBD2 and what you need to know, look it up on SAE.
Okay, thank you. So for the other, Doug, can you tell us what OEM manufacturers you're familiar with that provide freeze frame data? So freeze frame data, again, tells you the date, time, and mileage that a fault code occurred, which could help an insurer to determine whether something's from an accident or not. Can you tell us what OEMs you're familiar with that provide that?
Well, I can tell you that the European manufacturers provide the most amount of data in any respect. So when it comes to trouble codes, they have by far the most amount of information on board. They also provide the greatest level of detail on that freeze frame data. So when you get into the BMWs, the Audis, and so on, you're going to find date and time information. The Japanese manufacturers will typically give you number of key cycles, for instance, from when a system may have gone offline. But I do have to caution that a lot of that information is very detailed in nature and oftentimes not very intuitive. So, part of our challenge as collision repairers is not only getting access to that data, but trying to decipher what it means.
Okay, thank you. So going down the line with each OEM, can you tell us, do you foresee that your OEM manufacturer will come out with freeze frame data in the near future, starting with Chris from Honda?
Actually, a lot of our codes, many of them do have data, mileage since first fail, mileage since last fail, and that actually is part of emission-related codes for OBD2. It's part of the requirement.
Okay. Eric?
We also have freeze frame data in our cars, and I'd like to tag on to that a little bit. We're concentrating on the timestamp, this and that. Freeze frame data is there for the technician to be able to diagnose what went wrong with the car, because oftentimes a car is brought to the shop, and the problem doesn't exist today. The problem was back whenever that fault code came on, and there was freeze frame data there. So you look at data values in there to determine, okay, what at that moment triggered that response. And you can use the timestamp, you can use the key cycles to talk to the customer and kind of figure out, okay, it says it happened so many key cycles ago, what day was that, can you give us an idea? It's there as a diagnostic tool to try and figure out what happened with the car that set that light or that code at that moment.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Ryan?
Doug, I'm assuming since we're Fiat Chrysler, we've got dual citizenship, so that we count as a European, don't we? But no, we do have a lot of that. It may not be as detailed as some of the other OEs, but I think we feel the data is pretty good as far as what it gives and what it needs to. But if there's other stuff that's out there, I mean, these guys are constantly looking for ways to give us more specific information because it gives us more feedback, and certainly the engineers more feedback as to what they're doing too. So it is important, and I'm sure we'll continue to get stronger with that.
Thank you. John?
Yes, we do have freeze frame data to the extent in the systems I'm not engineer to describe or to be able to say. We do have an engineering staff with us at our booth today, so be happy to discuss that. I do know we are working very closely now with OnStar And with OnStar, they do have capabilities to see data, including freeze-frame data, relative to accidents. And there is an enormous amount of data coming through that OnStar is able to capture that will help in the repair process, and even maybe possibly do some pre-scan analysis, just even coming from what we have through that way. So that's going to be a great part for us going forward, is integrating OnStar data into the repair process so that we can help shops identify what's potentially out there that we can look at. But as far as the extent, I'm not sure, but our engineers would be happy to discuss that.
Thank you, John. Justin?
It's my understanding that we do have freeze frame data, but not 100% of the time. Right now I'm working with engineering to identify when you can get that freeze frame data and when you can't, and make that available to the greater collision community.
Okay, thank you. So now I'm going to turn and talk to my insurance friends here. So again, we have Chris Evans from State Farm, Jerry Poirier from Farmers. Let's give both of them a big round of applause, if you would, please. So Chris and Jerry, obviously you put yourself out here, be on the stage, and I appreciate that. From the bottom of my heart, I do, right? So I want you to be thinking that you've got 6 OEMs up here, a lot of talk about scan. You're here representing on my behalf the other insurers. If there's anything you wanted to ask them, and you could ask them, what would it be? So do you have to answer that now, but be thinking about that, right? What's something you might want to ask them that you think a lot of insurers might be thinking about? Let's talk first of all about, if we scan a vehicle, there's no fault codes, right? Now it comes down to who should pay for it. Some insurers say no, they won't. Some insurers say we will, because we recognize it was the only way that we can know for sure what was wrong with the vehicle. Obviously, there's some benefits that we can pre-diagnose what parts we need. It can save us in cycle time, and there's a lot of benefits there. Does your company, and I won't say have a position, because that's probably not fair to you, but is your company having conversations and dialogues about these types of things? And Chris, I'll start with you.
Well, absolutely, we're having conversations, as you can imagine, and I guess first of all, I want to thank you for the invitation. When you asked me to participate, I made it very clear that I'm not in a position to make any statements around State Farm's response to any of the position statements that have been offered.
In fairness to Chris, just so you all know, I asked Chris at 11 o'clock p.m. last night if he would sit on this panel discussion today. Just so you know that, I didn't give him any time to prep. So.
But he's a great guy, fair guy, and it's like, who could pass it up, right? So my participation here really is more selfishly educational. You build a great panel here, and this is great information, very timely. And I only need to, for the record, one thing, in full transparency, I need to debunk Chris's analogy earlier. I've been married 29 years to the same beautiful woman, and that bathroom scale has hit the wall many, many times, and we still use it. So maybe we have to adjust there. But
my problem is it'll read high.
Right. So
again, the question is, if there are no DTCs, right, diagnostic trouble codes, are found in a vehicle, so there's nothing found, it's all clear, or they're non-accident related, should the customer be required to pay for the scan? Should that be something that we just say it's like a medical x-ray? It was the only way we could make sure things were safe. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the whole idea around when do you scan and when don't you scan, the point of the panel is we haven't really landed on that position yet. Our position has been, you need to, first step, you need to account for the embedded technology that's affected in the collision itself or the repair process. If there are parts that have that technology, safety or otherwise, creature comfort, that are affected by that, and it's required, we're gonna make that consideration. We also, consider the scope and extent of damage in the process. So we haven't really landed on, the when part yet from a position standpoint. I am happy to, though, hear the flexibility, if you will, or the interest in more specificity and around when. Because in many cases, you may have a dent on that door on that Honda right there. Very minor dent that requires, panel repair. Well, does that require a scan? or does it not? You know, that's a legitimate question. You know, in an older vehicle, if you're replacing a bumper or a fender where no embedded technology exists, we traditionally would not have you know, considered a scan in that situation because there's no technology that's been affected. So my interest is really greater specificity around the position statements that have been offered, because they don't go unnoticed and they're not ignored. We take them very seriously. Our interest at State Farm is that our customers get put back into a safe, properly repaired vehicle every single time, no question. And so I can't really answer your question directly, Mike, because we haven't really arrived at where the milestone that you're referring to.
Right. So the next question I would pose is, assuming that these OEMs are willing to sit down and have a conversation about this, would State Farm, somebody such as yourself, would you consider sitting down just to get more educated so we can kind of remove the shops? Because right now we see the shops want to do the right thing, right? But then we have an insurer that they don't want to make mad because they don't want to lose $2 million worth a year from business. And now what happens is they're really at this crossroads, right? So my goal is, and my intent is, what can we do to work together to come up with some solutions to remove the shops out of the middle?
I've been here since Monday, and every meeting I've been in, this topic has come up. So to answer your question, we would love to sit down and visit directly, either as a group or one-on-one with car companies about greater specificity and accuracy in your positions, so that we do the right thing for the customer.
Right, so does State Farm right now have any guidelines as to what you will or won't do, or is it just up to each individual appraiser to make the best educated decision they can?
Again, it goes back to the technology that is affected by the collision or as a result of the repair of the collision. So the guidelines that we provide is if there's something that's affected and is required, a seat calibration or a sensor recalibration or a scan is required based on the extent of damage and the existence of that technology. We make that consideration and we pay for those those processes.
All right, thank you, Chris. So Jerry, now we're over to you, sir. Kind of the same question, right? If a shop scans a vehicle, there's nothing wrong with the vehicle as a result of the accident or no fault codes, but it was the only way we could determine it. What is Farmers' position on that? Because what I've heard is that Farmers has been very proactive in paying for this in a lot of regions, that you guys have kind of been the first ones to go out there and say, hey, we're supportive of this, we believe in it, it's the right thing to do. So has Farmers had any discussions, anything you can share with us in regards to your thoughts on this pre and post scans, recalibrations, etc.?
Definitely. There's probably 10 Farmers people in this audience right now, up to our highest level management, and I've been tasked with this process to figure out how we're going to deal with this. So Farmers is all about making sure our customer's safe, same as State Farm, right? We want to make sure the car's done correctly, on time, the first time. So if a scan's required, it's basically going to be on a case-by-case basis right now. I would like to talk a little bit about what Chris said, that yeah, we would love to absolutely sit down with the OEMs to get more specific areas that definitely need it, right? And I think some of the other industry folks, iCar is working on this as well. So I think it would take a lot of the, as you refer to, the friction out of the industry. So if the OEMs could give us more information from a car-specific standpoint, relay that to the information providers, right? That a lot of that friction would go away, right? So does this car have a safety system that we should consider, to Mike's point, right? About, okay, this would be a car that, hey, we probably should scan it to see if there is an issue, right? So we're still in the learning stages. I'm up here for the same reason, to learn. I know many of these folks here. Audi, and I'll give you an example on the Audi A8. You're doing the front bumper cover, active cruise control. There's a note in the guide that says, hey, you got to recalibrate this car, and this is what needs to be done. It takes all that friction between everybody away.
Right. So it sounds like this is kind of a challenge for the information providers that you need to get engaged. We need you. We need you to help us to remove some of this friction by coming up with labor times for a lot of these processes. Is that what I'm hearing from a lot of you? How many people are in agreement with that? Just up on the stage, just show of hands. Right? Okay. Mark, go ahead. You had a comment.
Yeah, I have to maybe dispel a little bit of a perception that's going on out there. I see Chris, I see Jerry, I see Tim Hessen. We are trying to work together to get an understanding. So please don't take this misperception of we don't talk to each other. We're trying to figure out the way to best take care of our customer, and I have to enlist you to take care of our customer the best way too. But the fact of the matter is, it's not secret over here and we're not telling you, and it's no, we're not paying it because we don't know. There are a lot of very proactive conversations that are going on. There are requests that we've done, and Jerry and I are both involved with iCar, just like John Eck over here, and we've come up with a matrix of what should be done, and that's always a work in progress because we're always releasing new technology and new vehicles. So please don't think that we're not talking to each other. We absolutely try to take care of those customers.
Fair statement. So with that said, you know, one of the concerns I hear from insurers is, well, if we scan every vehicle, severity is going to rise, right? Severity is going to go up. So let's say that the average RO or severity is $3,000 hypothetically, and it's $200 to scan a vehicle, then that's almost a 10% increase on severity. So, you know, obviously with all these accident avoidance features, and we have the liability as shops to make sure these things are working safely and properly when the vehicle leaves, are there discussions going on in regards to the underwriting of vehicles, right? Premium costs being tied into this, right? So are there discussions going to that? At what point do you think all these accident avoidance systems and the new ways we have to fix vehicles and diagnose damage, right? It's not just about set up and measure anymore, it's about set up and measure and scan. What are some of the conversations, or what do you expect underwriting in the future to start including that? So Jerry, I'll start with you first.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've never been more involved from this year forward on educating our underwriting people and our pricing people, right? Because if you look at the trends in the industry, severity's on its way up, frequency's on its way up, yet we have all the collision avoidance systems. Well, I would expect frequency at some point, maybe not in my lifetime, to go down, right? Because you have the avoidance systems, but right now, when those cars are getting hit by the 99 Durango, you know, that my wife drives, it's going to cost more. That's the bottom line. You know, severity is going to be what it is. You know, we want to make sure we pay the right amount to fix the car correctly. You know, and that's the bottom line in farmers' mind.
So for both of you, is the question for, I'm not asking on your specific carrier, but thinking for all the other insurance carriers, do you think the question is not so much if they an insurance carrier will pay for it, but what's reasonable? Is it more as like, should we be paying for this, or is the question more what's reasonable? Where do you think the issue lies? Chris?
I think it's both. You know, should it be paid for? And that gets back to the specificity. And anytime you have increasing technology, you have to have greater accuracy in the whens and the whats and the hows. So it's really both, Mike. And, you know, from the standpoint of, you know, will this end up, you know, showing up in rates? It's going to show up in rates in so much as the cost of, you know, repairing vehicles from an underwriting and actuarial standpoint, it just bears out. So, you know, really, at the end of the day, our interest is not to be wrestling and fussing and debating whether or not it needs to be done and how much. And you made a very good point, and I was going to make it if you didn't, so I'm glad you brought it up. This is really an estimating vendor issue kind of at its heart. And if it's required, if it's necessary, if there's a time that can be aligned to do it, it really, at the end of the day, and we talked about this in other meetings with many of you, it needs to be an included operation that's accounted for, and there's time allocated for that within the operation itself. But again, it needs to be very precise and specific.
Okay, great. So let me share another story with you. So I was at a shop in California. The customer said that something was a result of the accident. The body shop scanned the vehicle using Aztec's technology on a vehicle, and they found out it wasn't from the accident, informed the insurer denied the claim. The consumer filed a suit against the body shop and said, you did not have my permission to share my data. So now it's about who owns the data and what does your authorization form say as a collision repair. So one of the things that Aztec has done is they have drafted an authorization form that shops can utilize to incorporate into their own authorization forms that the customer gives permission to do that. Could you elaborate on that, please, Doug?
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that as we figure this out, and again, we're not controlling the timing on this. The automobile is actually, coming to the market, and it's what we're reacting to. But there's a consumer in this whole equation, and so our thought process was, how many repairers are taking the opportunity to gauge the consumer in the conversation as to what's needed. And so we put together this form. We've published it openly. It has nothing to do with our company. It's published on SCRS. I think you've actually helped send it out as well. And it doesn't have any particular agenda to it. It just basically says, here's what's the process of pre and post. Here's the information we collect. Here's how it's used. It may be shared with the insurance company, so it discloses that fact up front. And it says, in some instances, we may have to perform this function before it's even determined whether it's covered or not. And you, as the insured, agree to, approve this process, knowing you may have to pay for it. So I'm not saying that's the long-term answer, but I think short-term, it's important the consumer be aware as to, what their options are. And my concern is, while repairs and insurers figure this out, there's really an important constituent there that may be missing in that whole discussion.
All right, thank you. So going back to Jerry and Chris, do you foresee in the future it being written into the policy, or could you possibly see that automatically says if somebody's in an accident, a shop's going to have to access their data in order to settle the claim?
Well, so it kind of goes, we've been wrestling with this really for some time with the whole black box technology and who owns the information, and that's kind of been a chapter that's, that we've dealt with. The bottom line is, if in the event of handling a claim, you got to consider the facts of the loss in handling the claim. And if the facts of the loss present that, something happened as a result of the accident or not, it simply just goes into the overall equation of handling the loss. So there's nothing really new or mysterious there. This is not really not a new issue. If we have information that allows us to have insight into, how the loss happened, or whether there were occupants in the vehicle, how many, and how the accident happened. All that information is, if it's available to us, it's a fact of the loss, and it's considered in the claim handling.
Okay, great. So now I just want to share with you as insurers just some of my insight that I've seen on the positiveness of scans. Number one is we've heard that when George Avery was with State Farm, that State Farm spends around $49 million a day in rental car costs. I'm sure that number is somewhat close, wherever George said. At the end of the day, if we scan a vehicle in the beginning and we can identify the parts we need, now we can save on cycle time, right? The second thing is, when we scan vehicles in the beginning, we can also improve on-time delivery. On-time delivery is critical to an insurance company renewing a policyholder. It's critical to an OEM in retaining their brand. The other thing that I've had some insurers talk to me about behind closed doors is they've seen vehicles when they are actually a total loss, they can actually predetermine a total loss sooner than when it's halfway through the repairs and now you're past the point of no return. But they've also seen on some total loss vehicles that when they can take a car to an auction yard like Copart and a vehicle's been scanned, they actually see a higher return rate on salvage. So just some food for thought for you guys to ponder on, okay? Now, I want to share a couple things with me, and then we're going to open it up to the audience for questions. Dare Amberson, I may see if you can get a microphone in the back, if you wouldn't mind assisting me, and we'll take some questions from the audience. But here's what I believe. I believe we need to understand as an industry, it's not just about pre and post scans. It's about recalibrations, it's about reflashing, it's about initializations, it's about performing output tests. In the case of a Chrysler, it's about driving the vehicle in a straight line for 2 miles. Information providers, we need your help. We need your help to come up with realistic times that are fair for everyone. The OEMs have said they're willing to share with you what their service times are, but that would be a huge step. How many people agree with that? Give me an amen. All right, good deal. Number two, OEMs, what we're hearing from the insurers is, and from the industry as a whole, are there some parameters on this? If it's cut and dry, so be it. But if there are parameters, then let us know that. Is it start with a certain year, only certain features? Number 3, I encourage the OEMs that as you look at your certification processes and you certify shops, that I believe it's critical that you monitor your certified shops on how often they're researching OEM repair procedures. Because according to my studies with my collision advice, who pays for what surveys, less than 19% of shops are always researching OEM repair information. And if they're not researching it, shame on them and shame on us for not holding them accountable. So monitor how often they research things and drilling down on what they research. Number 4, for the OEMs, I believe that from a collision repair perspective, that we need some type of standardization of the OEM repair information. And I understand you may not be able to get somebody from Germany to standardize something with somebody from Japan or America. But at the end of the day, where I as a collision repairer need to go to look for something on whether or not I can use bumper filler or body filler to fix a bumper on a Ford is going to be different than a Toyota and different for a Chrysler. So for us as collision repairers who want to do the right thing, if I got to go 5 or 20 different places, there's no standardization. Please think about that. Next thing, we need a common authorization form for our industry that we all agree upon that can be used for customers to share data with us. Last but not least, 2 things. I believe that as an industry, we need a path to resolution. I believe that shops want to do the right thing because the OEM manufacturer said they need to. You may have an insurance carrier that says we don't pay for that, and now a shop's stuck in a position of deciding on the safety of a consumer. Do I do it for free? Do I charge the insurance company and push it and lose my DRP, which would be the kiss and death of my business, or do I absorb the cost? At the end of the day, there's no path to resolution. I think as an industry, we need to do that, and I'm willing to be the guy to help to lead that if you're willing to allow me. And last but not least, for the OEMs, right now, if I want to be Audi certified or Toyota, there is training for my collision technicians. There's also training for my painters through paint manufacturer training. Do you foresee a new role for OEM certification to be trained for mechanics? Mark Allen.
Excellent question.
Thank you.
I don't
High
have
five.
an answer. You know what? I have no answer. The fact of the matter is we have 36,000 body shops that are out there in the country. If you look at the number of body shops that are on my program, we represent less than 0.5%. And if you throw my body shops in with Ben from Mercedes, from
Gabriel from BMW.
Gabriel at BMW, they're the top, I feel, and I think they feel, they're the top 0.5% in the body shop business. How do we get to the other 35,500?
Totally agree.
We need someone to go out. We need you to be disciples, and we need you to hold your community responsible for being this level of professionalism.
Okay, thank you. Chris, do you foresee Honda in the future having a mechanical track where shops will have to have somebody to be Pro First certified, they'll have to have somebody that's trained on how to do these recalibrations, et cetera, et cetera?
Actually, that's going to happen. We have that's one of the planned modules that we're going to offer.
Perfect.
And we already offer modules on things like air conditioning. There's one coming out in October on tire pressure management, which has its own things. One of the challenges of all this technology is that it's not applied at a uniform point. There's not a model year where it starts off and it starts on one trim level and proliferates from there. An LX Accord may have a different set of systems on it than a touring level Accord. So that becomes a challenge, and where the estimation platforms need to list the cars, what they are by VIN, and what could be on those cars, because I fully understand what the insurance guys are saying about they need to figure out what they do and don't need to pay for, and not pay for things they don't want to.
Back to the question real quick, though. Honda is going to take and possibly come up with a curriculum that says if you're a Pro First, you have to have somebody that knows how to do these calibrations as part of your training.
Yeah, that's partially already in place. As an add-on to that, all of the online mechanical training that our dealers are required to take is available for purchase from Helm Incorporated.
Thank you. And if they stop by your booth, they can get information on that, right?
Yes.
All right, Eric, Toyota's position on training.
Yeah, the first thing that I'd like to say is we already have this technology built into our courses. So body techs that are coming to our hybrid technology class, there's a whole module on going in with a tech stream, performing a health check, and doing these actions. So the curriculum is already there, and the curriculum is even stronger on the service side of our business, of course, right, where service technicians are required to do it every day. So we are already blending what we have to meet the needs of our shops that choose to have a mechanic on site. We also realize that some of our shops choose not to do that work. They choose to ship the car over to the service department, more convenient for them, whatever it is. So we are constantly studying the need and ready to act on whatever's required. If that means a mechanical track, that's the way that we'll go.
Okay, thank you. Brian?
For us, quite simply, yes. Once the scan tool position statement came up, we began kind of refining our certification process to include kind of what you're talking about, policing that, and as well as including that as a module for being approved certified.
Okay, thank you, Brian. John?
Yeah, without not having a certification program today, but yes, I foresee that. However, I would challenge us as an industry, instead of having multiple ways, like you've mentioned, it doesn't do the shop any good. Why can't this be another type of path of training through iCar? So that a calibration certification or that type of training be done in a consistent manner that can make it easier for the shops, and we work that process through the existing platforms that are available today. iCar and ASE yesterday starting to share some of the information and supporting each other. I think that there are means already in place to help us do that without all of us coming up with our own curriculum and doing things different ways. So I think there's some opportunities there to make it easier on the shop to be able to be trained in multiple ways, so they're not out of the shop taking 25 different classes.
All right, thank you. Justin?
Nissan has about 1,200 certified shops around the country currently, and one of the main pieces of feedback that we're getting from them is they want more training. So Nissan's currently working with iCar very closely to develop some specialized training courses for our brands, Nissan and Infiniti. Those will be mandatory for our centers. We have not, as of yet, distinguished, one's for a body tech and one's for a mechanic. It'll probably just more identify so many personnel per shop.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go back to my two insurers, but then I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience. You've sat here, you've heard a lot of things. You've got all these OEM up there. Is there anything you want to ask them, Chris Evans?
I guess nothing really to ask from a technical standpoint. It's been very informative. I would just urge any car company that hasn't crafted a position statement, or if you're open to amending your current position statements, just to offer greater specificity again and clarity around the when and that that element. I think that will serve to eliminate a lot of confusion, a lot of tension, a lot of friction. We're certainly, again, open to doing what is right for the car and the customer, but again, when it's very broad, it's very difficult. So I would urge that. And again, finally, just to reiterate, passing that information, to Chris's point, with the even the variations in the models, that information is critical and really is becoming essential for estimating vendors to incorporate into their system, so we're writing accurate estimates.
Okay, Jerry?
Yeah, probably the one thing I want to say is that these are brand new statements, right, that have come out in the last, couple months. So I want to go back to somebody that mentioned something about you used to be able to see through the car to the ground. Well, do we remember when the unibody came out? We went through the same thing, right, as an industry. So I think I would ask that the industry work together to solve the issue, right? And by being more specific on what we really need to do to fix the customer's car right the first time and basically every time.
Okay, so I've avoided asking any of you all any hard questions because I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable and I want to maintain your friendship, but I'm going to ask you a hard question. And that is, If I'm a shop and Toyota tells me I need to do a 0-point calibration, or Nissan says it's mandatory I do this, and I have an insurance company that will not pay for that, what do you think I should do as a shop? And I'm going to start with you, Doug Kelly.
Well, we collect a lot of data, and part of the reason we're looking at it so hard is to try to figure out what the risk is if you don't do it. And I can tell you that as repairers, 40% of the trouble codes that we see are introduced during the repair process itself. So there's certain repair procedures that you're going to perform that will introduce fault codes through no fault of your own. I mean, it's just a function of what happens when you disassemble a car, cycle the key, move it to the paint shop without a part on it. So I'd say the risk to not doing this work, both from a reputation standpoint, a customer service standpoint, and even potential legal standpoint, is pretty high. So I'd love this issue resolved quickly, but it's in their best interest to at least do the post scan. I believe pre and post is necessary, but you have to save your business, make sure that car leaves correctly.
All right, so real quickly, 30 seconds or less. Justin, I'm a shop. You say I need to do this. I have an insurance company that says they don't want to pay for me to do it. What do you think a shop should do?
Yeah, the shops are definitely put in a tight spot there. I absolutely think the shop should do it. Whatever the OEM says is mandatory. If they take that language, they need to listen to that. If the insurance company does not want to pay for it, I would suggest the shop probably inform the customer of that. And I think once the customer, the driver of that vehicle, is educated, the insurance company is ultimately going to pay for it.
Okay, John? But again, just going back to the reality that this insurance company sends me $2 or $3 million worth of work a year, or $100,000, and I go and tell the customer to tell the insurance company, now I'm in jeopardy of losing that. How many people agree with that? That's real world. Raise your hands, right? So at that point, what do we do?
Having worked in insurance claims for 7 years, I'll tell you what I've seen is if an insurer denies something up front and the shop feels that that's necessary, taking it to the driver of the vehicle, and that driver then calling the insurance company, it'll get done.
Okay, thank you for that. John?
I think that's a great response. The question really is, what would you do if it was your car, if it was your wife's car, driving your children around? Would you still do it even at your own expense? There's a lot of goodwill that gets done in the industry, and there's a lot of ways to help get goodwill paid for, whether it be through the insurance company, whether it be through your local dealer. Maybe it's a vehicle that you don't have the tooling to properly do that scan. You need to either partner up with somebody that can and help you and get that done, or you need to get that vehicle into somebody's hands that's willing to do what's right for the customer.
Okay, thank you. Brian?
Similar, I mean, obviously, independent repair facility, a lot of the things that you put out there, if you're a direct repair provider, it's a big account. You never want somebody to be in a position where they're going to have to foot the bill for something, but at the end of the day, I think we all have a moral obligation to do what's right, and I think we have to do that.
Thank you. Eric?
I'm going to go to the crib bulletin position statement that we just published on this whole topic and say that we wrote in there, we tried to write in some clarification, and we said that we are going to require diagnostic scans on any vehicle that has evidence of an electrical system malfunction. If there's an electrical system malfunction, and that, by the way, could be a bent quarter panel if there's blind spot monitoring sensor attached to it. That's part of that electrical system, so that's a clarification that we shot to put in there for required. I'm also going to say that we went a step further and said that we strongly recommend that a scan be performed pre and post every single repair. And the reason that I say that is because we see value in that. Mike gave an example of a situation that saved an insurance company thousands of dollars by performing a scan that identified a problem that wasn't related to the accident. So whether it's related to the accident or not, I could argue strong value in performing a scan before you start repairs on every car, and before any car goes back to the customer for the shop's liability of repairs. You know, I have worked on many cars over the years, and I've left a connector or two disconnected over the years. And if I would have performed a diagnostic scan on that car, even though maybe it wasn't accident related, I would have been able to potentially identify that disconnected connector, and that's my argument for we strongly recommend that you perform a pre and post check on every single vehicle that comes to the shop.
All right, thank you. Chris?
Well, I would like to see the industry get to a point where everybody gets paid for what they're supposed to do, but it comes down to the liability of not doing it. It's just like all these other gentlemen have said, it's too great. And I consider it, having worked on a few cars in my life too, I consider it a matter of conscience and a matter of pride in one's work.
Okay.
That you do what you have to do, you do the right thing for the customer. This is change, and change is difficult for people, but I think this industry has a tremendous amount of talented people in it, and we will work together going forward, and we'll figure this out.
All right, thank you. Mark?
I have to reflect the good sentiments and thoughts of my colleagues and friends, but I also have to stress that we're just talking about the people in that car. These cars are interacting with other cars, so there's a broader impact. And as we move more towards an autonomous state, those impacts will grow even more. So this should just become your normal practice, period.
Great. So Jerry, from an insurer standpoint, I'm a shop, I want to do the right thing. Insurer says I don't, OEM says I have to. I mean, I'm really kind of screwed, right? So what do I do?
That's a great question, Mike. I would like to think that any insurer that was provided the correct documentation and knowledge about that particular instance of why you requested to do that would pay it. You know, it does come down to the customer. The bottom line is the customer. So there has to be dialogue. There has to be communication with that shop as to, hey, why are you not paying for this, right? Sometimes education is great. You know, our folks in the field as well. You know, if you can, and we try to educate our folks on everything, and as you know, there's just a ton of stuff out there, right? So anything the collision repairer can do to try to help educate our people as well on the technical side would lead to less friction and those type of issues.
Well, thank you. Chris, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, not really much different. You know, friction and tension is waste and it's cost, and the ultimate, you know, the ultimate payer of that is our customer, and you know, we want to avoid that altogether. And again, I can't stress enough, the more precise our positions are, the less friction and tension we're going to have. To answer your question directly, we respect a repair facility's decision to do what they're going to do. We're not forcing, you know, anybody to do anything. But again, if we have the right information at the right place at the right time, we avoid all of this.
Right.